Good evening and buenas tardes, NVUSD families. We are thrilled that you are joining us tonight. Mr. Bassinet, can you go to the next slide, please? We have our wonderful interpreter, Miss Claudia. Can you explain to our Spanish-speaking attendees how to access the Spanish translation channel?
Yes, Miss Sandra Jennings. Good evening. Sí, buenas tardes a todos. Los servicios de interpretación estarán disponibles para esta junta. Si tienen la amabilidad de fijarse en su pantalla, en la parte inferior en medio van a ver un signo de mundo como lo indica esta flecha. Si pueden hacer un clic con un chasqueo y después elegir el español, con mucho gusto toda esta junta se les va a interpretar. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Gracias, Miss Claudia.
My pleasure.
And Mr. Bassinet, when you get a moment, can you please bring back up the slides? Thank you. And then go to the next slide. So good evening, everyone. Tonight, I'm one of the presenters. My name is Pat Andre Jennings. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Instructional Services. Thank you for joining us tonight to learn a little bit about Napa Valley Independent Study. That is an independent study option that we've had available in Napa Valley for quite a while. And tonight we're just going to share a little bit about that particular program. Tonight you will hear from Matt Manning, who's the Director of Curriculum Instruction and English Learner Services for elementary, as well as Monica Reddy, who's the Director of Curriculum and Instruction and English Learner Services for secondary. And finally, finishing up the evening will be Drew Heron, who's the Coordinator of Independent Study, among a host of other wonderful duties. So that's our wonderful team that's joining us tonight, along with Miss Claudia, our interpreter. So with that, we are going to start our presentation about Napa Valley Independent Study. So what is Napa Valley Independent Study? And so it is actually a program that's available to students in grades TK through 12th grade. For this upcoming year, it's an alternative to in-person classroom instruction. And for this, independent study, enrollment is voluntary. So it's optional to enroll in Napa Valley Independent Study. Next slide, please. So when would you consider having your child enroll in independent study? So for this year specifically is when you as a parent feel that your child's health will be put at risk by attending in person. The Napa Valley Independent Study Program is the option that's available in NVUSD. If you do not want your child to attend school in person and you feel that it's putting your child's health at risk. And this is determined by the parent. So you would just need to inform us. We'll talk a little bit more about how you would go to enroll in Napa Valley Independent Study. Next slide, please. I know there've been some questions about, well, what does the program look like? What is it going to look like? How is it going to be different from distance learning last year? And so this TK through 8th grade program is being offered for this 1 year for the 2021-22 school year. The way that the program is designed, that the synchronous learning will be primarily virtual, obviously because of students' health concerns. So students would be accessing the synchronous learning or virtual learning, access learning virtually. And then there may be some in-person or virtual intervention or office hours that Mr. Manning will talk a little bit about in terms of the schedule. And these would be scheduled with the teacher. Next slide, please. I'm going to go ahead and toss it to Director Manning, who's going to speak a little bit about the curriculum that's going to be used in NVIS and along with the schedules. Director Manning, take it away.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to have the opportunity to be with you all virtually this evening. I will speak to you just about the elementary and middle school program. The curriculum that will be used at the elementary and middle school levels will be the same curriculum that's used in our traditional school settings. So that will be modified to adapt the curriculum to an online setting for our students. So I'll talk to you more in a moment about the focus that we will, what we will focus on during our synchronous learning time in math and language arts, but our curriculum will be the same curriculum at the TK through 8th grade levels. The secondary curriculum will be Edgenuity, which is a standards-based online learning platform. The courses are A through G aligned, allowing students to meet the UC A through G requirements. Next slide, please. So the structure of the day will look different for students in TK through 3rd grade than for students in 4th through 8th grade. So I'll start by describing the experience, the day for the week for our students in TK through 3rd grade. Students will have daily synchronous learning in TK through 3rd grade, which will be 1 hour per day of online virtual learning with a teacher. So during that time, as I mentioned, the focus will be primarily on language arts and math, with asynchronous learning time, which is time when the students will be working more independently, will be when students have access to science and social studies curriculum. So students in TK through 3rd grade will have that 1 hour of time with their teacher daily. The asynchronous learning time is time when students will be working independently under the guidance of their parent or caregiver. So that would be 4 to 6 hours per day based on the grade level. Again, time that students would be working primarily independently with the support of a caregiver. The intervention will be scheduled throughout the week on an as-needed basis. Students who are in need of a little bit more support will have time with online or potentially in person with an intervention teacher or the teacher who they're working with to provide them that little bit of extra support to help them be successful. Next slide, please. So the program in 4th through 8th grade, in those grade levels, students will have 1 hour per week of synchronous learning time. So students will meet with their teacher and other students in both TK through 3rd grade and 4th through 8th grade. Students will be with their teacher and other students during that time period. So in 4th through 8th grade, it is 1 hour per week of synchronous learning time. Those students in 4th through 8th grade will also have a daily live interaction with an adult from the Napa Valley Independent Study School setting. So that might be the teacher, it might be an attendance person who's checking in, a social worker checking in to do a wellness check. It's just one daily live interaction with another adult from the independent study program. And the students will also, just like in TK through 3rd grade, will be engaging in asynchronous learning time, and they'll be engaging in 4 to 6 hours a day, again, under the guidance of their caregiver. And the intervention in 4th through 8th grade, very similar. Students will be provided that support as needed throughout the week. Next slide, please. I'm going to go ahead and pass to Monica Reddy, our Director of Secondary Curriculum Instruction.
Thank you, Director Manning, and good evening to our community. We'll continue with scheduling for 9th through 12th grade. Students enrolled in 9th through 12th grade at Independent Studies will engage in their learning 1 hour per week per content. That will be with their teacher and other students. Asynchronous learning, that second box, is a part of a student's daily schedule, which means they will have assignments that they need to complete, and they should plan for approximately 4 to 6 hours per day to complete those assignments. Completion of those assignments is important to their engagement as well as the earning of their credit. And then lastly, additional support will be provided through teacher office hours as they are engaging in their content independently. Next slide, please. If your student is a multi-language learner who needs support in their development of the English language, you're welcome to enroll in Independent Studies. Students who are learning English will have support for their language development, and they will have support 2 ways. One, through their courses, their content-specific courses, in addition to a specific course focused on their English language development. Next slide, please. If your child has an individual education plan, prior to considering and enrolling in Independent Studies, a meeting must be held to determine if that placement in Independent Studies is an appropriate placement for your child. With that, now you'll hear from Mr. Heron, who will provide more details about Napa Valley Independent Studies.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Next slide, please. So our attendance expectations are a little bit different than our traditional schools. Traditional schools, just being there is enough to be counted for in attendance. But with independent study, it's not just being there, but also work completion. It's very important that all those things are getting done, because that is how we accrue our ADA or our apportionment, which is how we are paid for our students attending our schools. So that the work completion is just as important as being there as in person. So when we have our TK through 8th grade students, and if there is an issue with students missing at least 3 times in a week, this will result in a re-engagement plan for parents and the students, and that will be set up with the teacher and or myself. This re-engagement plan will be to address, how the student will make up the work that they've missed. Maybe it might be some intervention time that we'll set up for you to meet with the teacher and get caught up, or to look at other resources that will be used to support that student. Next slide, please. For the 9th through 12th grade, they're only going to be meeting, as Mrs. already said, with their teacher 1 hour per week. So it's more based on not just they do need to make sure they're attending with their meeting times, but also just as important that they're completing at least 3 days of work. So if those things are not happening, then we will also set up a re-engagement plan with the parents and students, just like we do for the TK through 8th grade, just to try to address, how we can help that student get back on track. So for any students that are continuing to miss their meetings and turning in work, and we're having to constantly have those re-engagement meetings, we will then meet as a group to decide whether or not independent study is an appropriate placement. It's a very unique program. It's a very unique learning style, and it is not for everybody. So it's okay for us to, and we'll do all we can to make sure that you can be successful. And that's why we have those re-engagement meetings and try all these different interventions. But if it's continuing to be a problem, then we'll have to evaluate whether or not this is the best placement for that student. Next slide. So as Mr. Manning was pointing out earlier, and Mrs. Reddy, that there's about 4 to 6 hours of asynchronous time that the families are going to be helping their students learn. And then remember, that asynchronous time is, basically the parent becomes the teacher at home. So we do have a lot of responsibilities and expectations around that to make sure the student can be successful. We want you to provide guidance and support during that learning time, make sure the students are completing their assignments, provide transportation as needed for the intervention times and office hours that may be set up for your student to meet with their teachers. For those that maybe drive, those high school students, that is something that can be their responsibility, but it's still just as important to meet for those intervention times. We really want you to check in with your child regularly to monitor their work completion. That 4 to 6 hours can really add up. So missing one day just means that you have to do double the next day. So having that regular schedule, making sure that you're checking in with your student, looking at what it is that they're doing, asking them to show you how they've completed or what they have completed for that day, just really not only helps them, but just, helps you as far as being able to stay on top of it and make sure that they are completing their work timely. Providing a lot of time management. And I think this is the one that most students struggle with the most. And, they have a tendency to kind of want to revert back into that, the traditional school setting where I'm just going to do my homework the night before. Even the TK through 3rd grade students or 8th grade students, you may be assigned something on a Monday, but it might not be due until Wednesday. So just really that time management, really staying on top of what they're doing, make sure that their assignments are completed on time, is just going to allow them to have the most success possible. And then lastly, ensure your child attends office hours when needing additional support. And those will be offered weekly. Next slide. All our students will have access to Chromebooks if they need them and hotspots. So and those will be available throughout the school year. So all you need to do is just literally let our office know. We have them on site on hand, and we will get those to you right away. Books and supplies will be distributed after orientation as we try to scale this for all our parents who will be joining our program. Next slide. So the big question, how are we going to enroll in NVIS? So what you'll need to do is go to the enrollment website through the Napa Valley Unified School District and look for the transfer request. You click on that and it'll bring you up to the Napa Valley Unified School District Schoolmint, and you're going to select to apply for an intra-district transfer to Napa Valley Independent Studies. Mr. Bassinet, can you click on that MESD Schoolmint link for me, please? Thank you. So most of you already have a Schoolman account as you've done your the Aries portal to check for data confirmation. So you'll log in. If you don't have one, you can see there below, you create an account, and it'll just take you through some steps to get your information in there and then validate that you want to transfer to Napa Valley Independent Studies. All right, if you could go back, Mr. Bassinet. Thank you. So once you submit that, then someone from my office will contact you to confirm your child's assignment. And that way you'll know that you have filled it out correctly. And we will be doing that daily. And then we will then notify you about your orientation time after that. So you know when to come that week of August 16th. Next slide. So as I said before, this is a very unique program, and there is an option that, you know, if you choose this program and you realize this is not a good fit for your student, there is an option to go back to your home school. So students who decide that need to let me know, and we're required to place you within 5 school days of your request. Now, one thing to remember here is that we will try to place you back at your home school, but there can be situations where like certain grade levels fill up. There's no longer any space at that school. You're giving up your spot at that school to come to Napa Valley Independent Studies. So if you request to go back, we'll make that happen within 5 school days. But there's no guarantee that you will be able to go back to your home school. That will be the first option. But if we are not able to make that happen, then we'll look for the next closest option, and that was what will be offered to you. Next slide, please. All right, and this goes back to Mrs. Jennings.
Well, thank you, Mr. Heron. So we just wanted to give you a sense of the timeline that we have. I know that many parents might have some concerns around students returning to in-person learning. I know there's some concerns around whether the Delta variant, that we received some emails around that and what the options are. And so we wanted to present this information to you tonight, that independent study is the option for students who it's not safe for them to return, or there's some concerns around them returning to in-person learning. This independent study was designated as the option for school districts to use for students who wanted to have virtual access to learning. So this is the option that we have been given from the California Department of Education for students who want some kind of virtual learning. So, and as Mr. Heron pointed out, it is a very unique program, and it does require, it's in the name, it says independent studies, that there's a great deal of independence sort of required in that program. But we wanted to give you a sense of the program and what the structure was going to look like. And then here's the timelines that we are operating under. So Schoolmint opens to inter-district transfers. I believe it's actually open now, but I know for sure it'll be open tomorrow morning. And if you are interested in having your child enrolled in independent studies, as Mr. Heron pointed out, you go into Schoolmint, you apply for an inter-district transfer, and then someone from NVIS would contact you. We are asking that families make that decision or determination by Wednesday, August 11th. And that will help us to ensure that we have the appropriate staffing in place so that students can get placed by the first day of school, which is August 18th. current independent study families that are on this call just because they're curious about some of the changes that have happened in independent study are being invited to orientations August 11th and August 12th. And those are for returning students, because there have been some little changes in sort of the regulations around independent study that were pointed out tonight regarding the daily live interaction for students who are in 4th through 8th grade. That was not a requirement prior. And so we want to make sure that families have that orientation so they understand some of the changes that have been made. And then for new students that are enrolling in an independent study, there will be orientations, as Mr. Heron pointed out, August 16th and August 17th. To give you an opportunity to go over the expectations, and there's an agreement that needs to be signed so that everyone's really clear about what is required for independent study. And then you'll have an opportunity to meet your teachers and sort of get a better sense of the program. Next slide, please. Information will be updated on our website on a regular basis. There are this slideshow will be available along with this presentation on the website as soon as we can possibly get it up. And so there's a link on our website, and it's actually on the front page, the Back to School 2021 school year questions and answers. So you can go there if you have questions that are not necessarily related to independent study, but that's a good place to go and check out. And then if you have questions as you've listened to the presentation, since we're not opening up for questions, please email those questions at communications@nvusd.org, and we will work to add them to our frequently asked question list so that you can have those and get the information that you need to make a decision regarding what's best for your child for the upcoming school year. So regardless of what you choose, please know that NVUSD is ready and prepared to welcome your child back either in person full-time, which is our plan for this upcoming school year, or through independent study in some kind of virtual option. Next slide, please. And thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful evening. That's the conclusion of our information session. And we will be providing updates in the next week to if there's been any changes. So thank you again for joining us. Everyone have a good evening. Are there any other comments from anyone? Anything else we need to cover? We're good? Okay, thank you guys. Good night, everyone.